Testing, testing.
Good morning. Welcome to the Council meeting town of Qualicum Beach. And I first want to acknowledge that we're on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish people, in particular our Qualicum First Nation. So we have an agenda, but there are a couple of additions to the agenda. I'm going to ask Ms. Swenson to point out the agenda additions.
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. So we have items under 8.1c of the regular agenda, adding 2 further subsidy requests, and also under 8.1e to solidify a resolution for the Rotary Earth Day cleanup. So both under Section 8. It's page 6 of your agenda.
Move as amended.
Thank you.
Any other changes to the agenda? No other changes, then the agenda is adopted as amended. So the next item is the consent agenda, and it goes quite a ways about the benches and right until business arising from the minutes. That was discussed at the March 19th meeting. Is there anything that Council wishes to discuss separately that's on the list of the consent agenda? Councillor Skipsey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I wasn't in attendance when the bench review was taking place, but there was discussion about having the Director of Finance talk about issuing tax receipts and that would be discussed at the meeting. So I'm wondering if there is an update on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hare.
Yes, I believe we would issue tax receipt for the benches. The only portion that we may not, that we may be restricted for issuing tax receipt is for plaque dedications, because they would imply a personal benefit to an individual.
Okay. So with that, on the consent agenda, could I ask that, is there any other concerns about the consent agenda? Councillor Skipsey?
There were several amendments to the minutes that I have forwarded to staff, so.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
Other than those amendments, the consent agenda would be adopted. And the next item is under business arising from the minutes. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. So there's just 2 notices of motion. One is just talking about per diems. For this is something that obviously we shouldn't make hard and fast decisions today, Usually the process when you set remuneration is done the last year of your term, and there's a review. But just the one thing I want to put on the table, if we are going to be doing that review at the end of the term, is looking at per diems relative to just basically your salary. Because I do strongly believe that we should have a very healthy salary, given how it's hard to hold down a full-time job in this community and be on council. But at the same time, a per diem sort of doubles up with your salary. But I just suggest that this get moved to strategic planning 2025. So that would be in the fall, I believe.
Yeah. Okay, so motion to defer this item to the strategic planning session, seconded by, I'll second that. Any other comments? All in favor? Opposed, if any, carries. We're done. It's good.
And the second one is we had that very interesting and somewhat large building on First and Beach where we had a public information meeting essentially in council chambers, a committee of the whole more or less on that. I'm not aware of a application being put in, so if there is one, my apologies. But I've talked to someone who's sort of adjacent to the proposal, and they said there'd be some interest in maybe working with the town to see about a community health center there. This is something where I feel strongly if we're going to be doing any sort of public-private partnership where the town gets a benefit or the community gets a benefit, whether it's a nonprofit or someone else, you flag that early. Just from our previous term with the whole issue with East Village, and then did we talk to all the owners of Naked Naturals or not? And there's some confusion over that, just to make sure it's very clear and above board. The idea I have here is that if we can find a way to leverage some provincial or federal funds for healthcare in the area, we can also then go to the proponent and say, and now we can make the building a little bit smaller. Or maybe we split it up in two, or who knows, or we switch some of the rentals into condos for sale, and then that's more attractive for the developer with less units. So it's just, what would happen next is you'd have an in-camera with the proponent, say, how can we shrink the building down a bit and still see a public benefit for the healthcare center? I don't presume the outcome of that. But it's just to make sure that we actually have that good faith conversation where I feel for a really complicated project like this, sometimes the proponent comes in and sort of like throwing darts at a dartboard and they hope they'll hit with what council wants. But by doing an in-camera meeting where we're going over financial information, which is a reason to go in camera, then we can actually hammer out whether it can work or not. And if it doesn't work, we can rise and report with, we tried and it's not gonna work out. Or if there is something, they'll say, well, we'll hope to work together more details as we have them.
So we recommend it to, according to staff recommendation? Thank you.
The staff recommendation, I think, is quite correct.
Thank you, and I'll second that. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Delegations. Royal Canadian Legion Branch. Ms. Brulette, you're up. Come on up. And just pull the microphone down a bit and push the start button. No, you push the button at the base, and so it turns green. There.
Like, where it turns green. Okay, excellent. Anyways, good morning, Council and Mayor. I believe you've all had the opportunity to read the report that we sent in, the financials, which is part of our agreement with the town. I want to thank Council very much for the 5-year plan that you entered into with us. It's kind of a win-win. It's a win for, we have volunteers, but no money. You have some money, and we can help. So it's a good partnership in that regard. And just so you're aware, as well as the contribution of the Legion and the town of Qualicum Beach, there's been a number of community partners who have stepped up, Berwick, Raymond James. There's a number that have helped us along the way so we can provide top drawer entertainment for the day. I'm open to any questions if you'd like to, if you've got any concerns or.
You know how it works. After you finish speaking, we'll have some questions. Are you finished your
Oh,
presentation?
okay. Well, if you've had an opportunity to look at the report, I think it's all there. We do Canada Day, Remembrance Day, New Year's Levy, and the partnership that we have with the town of Qualicum Beach allows us to do all of that for the community.
Sure. Thank you, Ms. Brulette.
So I think I'm finished.
Any questions or comments from council? Thank you.
That's it?
Yep.
Poof. It's easier than it used to be, right?
Well, you remember how it works. We listen to delegation, and staff may come back with a recommendation. Yeah, thank you. The Qualicum Beach Lawn Bowling Club. Who's going to speak? Mr. Brunskill? Yes. Come on up, Mr.
It says I've got 3 minutes. Is that?
5. You're into the earlier presentation already.
Okay. And is this for the complete presentation for the 3 of us? 5 minutes?
If you can do it in 5 minutes, great. If you need more, we'll ask Councillor to give you more time.
Okay, thank you. Hello, my name is Alan Brunskill. I'm the president of the Qualicum Beach Lawn Bowling Club. I'm here with our treasurer, Phil Atkinson, and our games director, Mike Ward. The bowling club was founded in 1979, and it has prospered thanks to the dedicated efforts of many volunteers. We provide healthy, active indoor and outdoor bowling games to our present membership of approximately 160. This, coupled with a busy social schedule, keeps us all on our toes. In 2005, the club decided to expand our facilities and build the indoor green. This project was spearheaded by Mr. Gavin Reid. This massive, for us, project was accomplished by the members with many fundraising projects and grants from government and elsewhere. The new building was officially opened in 2007, and I'm sure you remember that. And it has been a resounding success with our members and bowlers from across the island and beyond. Time marches on, and our facilities constantly need repair and updating. 2 projects we wish to deal with this year are replacing the roof on the indoor green and installing a solar system on the original building roof. These projects are costly, and we're here today to request a financial contribution from the town. I'd like to ask Phil and Mike to elaborate on that, if I may. Thank you.
Good day. We submitted the paperwork, and I'm sure everybody's
If you
had
would
a
just
chance.
state your name, please.
Oh, Philip Atkinson, the treasurer for QBLBC. I'm sure everybody's had a chance to read the paperwork that we submitted, and we're here to seek the town of Qualicum Beach's help with the requirement of replacing the roof in the new section of the building. As you're aware, this is town property which is being rented by Qualicum Beach Lawn Bowling Club. We have continued to maintain the building and property with the help of volunteers, and when required, hire local trades to complete the work beyond our volunteers' abilities. The roof was inspected by 3 different contractors, and it was found to be soft in some areas and that the shingles required replacement. And some of the eave work will be required, with a cost ranging between $50,000 and $63,000. The membership feels that the town should be looking after the replacement of the roof, and we should be looking after the inside work. QBLBC is willing to put 50% towards the repair of the roof, with the town looking after the remaining costs. We would ask that the town take a look at our rental agreement and amend it to be more in line with the curling club. We will continue to offer our facility to other nonprofit groups as possible. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you. Was there a third speaker? Okay.
Good day, everybody. I'm Mike Ward, and I'm the district games person for the Qualicum Beach Lawn Bowling Club. And it's, as you see, it's a beautiful sunny day. We could be making power if we had solar panels today. So anyway, the bowling club is a year-round use facility providing games and social activities for the community and seniors. Why solar? Our club's highest monthly bill is the hydro bill, which is increasing over the next 2 years And the solar panels will help reduce this cost and make more money available for other projects like maintenance of the building and demonstrate environmental leadership and sustainability, benefiting the community and seniors and reducing our carbon footprint and ensures financial stability. The batteries will make it still operate with power outages during storms, which are becoming more frequent. The cost is approximately $60,000 for a 19 kilowatt system with a government grant of $1,000 per kilowatt or $19,000 return. Now, I believe I'm not sure if that's provincial or federal return on that one. And we are looking for 1/3 help
Just a moment,
from the
Mike.
town.
Just a moment, Mr. Ward. Council, okay with extending time? Yes, go ahead.
Oh, okay, sorry, I see this. We are looking for 1/3 help from the town, which is $20,000, 1/3 from the club funds, and 1/3 from a private donation, some of which may be returned upon payment from the government incentive grant. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. Any questions? Councillor Harrison.
So this is I just want to thank you guys for all the work you've done already for a town-owned building. Just one thing, looking at the energy bill, I've talked to the gentleman who's building the affordable housing project about energy efficiency in the past, and he mentioned that it's essentially the sealing in the air in the building, which is the biggest way to get greater efficiency. And I'm not saying that the solar panels shouldn't be done, but just something, if there's someone in the group who's handy, who knows about that, I don't. I am the opposite of that. But that might be another way to reduce your heating bill as well. There might be some renos that are relatively inexpensive, and the two could double up and you'd be paying much less.
And I would categorize Councillor Harrison's comment as a suggestion to look into. Thank you. Anything else? Thank you for your presentation and for the work you do. It's a wonderful facility, and making it indoor as well as outdoor. I think I see people from all over the island come and practice. So well done. Thank you. And the report will come from staff at the next council meeting as how we would proceed with your request. Thank you. Next is the correspondence from Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere. And I think this is a good one to refer to the strategic planning session in the fall of 2025. Councillor Skipsey? Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Vander, Valk. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor, did I miss you? I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yes.
I'd also like to make a comment to ask Ray from the Lee House. He's the manager for Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere to be a delegation to us and let us know to a detailed summation of all that they do for our community. And I believe he's proposing that if we can forgive the Lee rent, which is an expense that all nonprofit organizations have. They can get grants, but when it comes to their overhead or administration, there is no coverage. And they're offering a full sponsorship of the highest category if we can help out with that.
Okay, so the motion to refer it is passed. You can make a new motion asking or requesting a presentation by Mr. Ray Roniak. Is that seconded? Councillor Skipsey seconding. This will just be an invitation. Sorry.
We haven't voted on the first motion.
We didn't. Oh. I think we did.
Did we? No,
Yeah.
I didn't see a vote. Okay, sorry.
Yeah. No, we voted on it. It was very quick. So with a separate motion is to invite Mr. Roniak to make a presentation at a future council meeting. And seconded by Councillor Skipsey. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? And carried. Thank you. Echo Players letter of support. That letter has gone in support. There was a timing issue, so but I wanted you to know that I couldn't imagine anyone not supporting this request. So that's just for your information. Bylaws. We have the tax rate bylaws. Mr. Hare.
Thank you, Your Worship. The tax rate bylaw in front of you for your consideration establishes tax rates for the municipality and for taxing authorities that levy for a tax amount. So that would be the RDN Hospital, and Vancouver Island Regional Library. The tax rates are set to collect the amount of tax revenue that was approved in the financial plan bylaw for the town, and the amount of taxes that have been levied by the RDN, the library, and the hospital district. There is a schedule attached to the bylaw that identifies the individual rates, and I'd be happy to answer any questions on the bylaw in front of you for consideration.
Thank you. So this is for the tax rates bylaw for first time. We can pass them all three and do adoption at a later time.
Yes, it's the bylaw has to be adopted before May 15th by legislation, according to legislation. So we've got it in front of you for 3 readings today and scheduled for adoption in May.
Okay. Council, any questions or comments? Can I have a motion to proceed with first reading? Councillors Vander, Valk, Councillor Skipsey, discussion, all in favor, opposed if any, carried. For second reading, Councillor Harrison, Councillor Young, discussion, all in favor, opposed if any. And for third reading, Councillor Young, Councillor Skipsey, all in favor, carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hare. And then we have for first and second reading for the Qualicum Beach Freedom of Information, Ms. Svensson.
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. The bylaw is on page 54 of your agenda package, and it's basically getting the Freedom of Information bylaw up into a current standard. The provision is there to have myself appointed as the head, and alternatively, if I'm not available under the community charter, my deputy would be the head for Freedom of Information requests. So the bylaw here is before you for 3 readings with adoption in May.
Can this bylaw be read 3 times in one motion, or it needs to be separate?
Prefer to be separate.
Separate, okay.
Thank you.
Any questions regarding this item? Then can I have a motion for first reading? Councillor Skipsey, Councillor Vander Valk, discussion, all in favor, opposed if any, carried. For second reading, Councillor Harrison, Councillor Young, discussion, all in favor, then carried. And then for third reading, Councillor Skipsey, Councillor Young, all in favor, opposed, carried. Thank you. General government. I put some of the stuff I do in my report, but there's so many other things that I joined Councillor Vander Valk or other members of council for different events, but they're basically just attending. But what we did also do, Councillor Vander Valk, Councillor Harris, and I attended the AGM for the Chamber of Commerce in the old Bailey's. It's the new eatery, and I think it was packed, and I think it's been full use all the time. Although there was only about 24 people that attended on behalf of the chamber as far as membership, which was I thought it was the first time that it was that low. But anyway, it was a good presentation. We have a new board chair, and there were some other discussions about how they operate. Unless council has some other issues, I think our agreement with them is working out just fine. And then this weekend, all 3 of us, for most of the time, we met at the AVICC in Nanaimo. We carpooled. We didn't stay overnight. We came back every night. We met here at 7 in the morning, roaring to go, and then came back in the evening. And I was very pleased of how well we all worked together at these meetings. Met with 2 ministers about the comments and some other issues that were generally for closed session, but it was helpful to be able to speak with the people who you talk with at the other end of the phone. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. We all made sure to get lots of cards from provincial staff of the ministers at that event. I know I saw the mayor speaking to some of the staff for Minister Anderson, and so did I. One thing that I did attend last night, there was a discussion about a proposed facility for the RDN. That might be something I'll take offline with the mayor with what I thought of that. And then just the only other thing that I think was really germane is just a question through the chair to staff. It was just a social call, but I was talking to the owner of Pheasant Glen, who's in a bit of a bind because the provincial legislation has really hamstrung him a bit in that the stay for a short-term rental has to be at least 90 days, but as soon as you've stayed 90 days, the Rental Tenancy Act kicks in, and now you're legally a tenant, and it's very complicated potentially. So I was just wondering, is there any way, if the town was to designate just as a temporary policy, that we could issue business license for short-term rentals in Pheasant Glen? Would that sort of address the bind the province has put us in with their policy? Just a question, like, because I don't know if that's a policy or if it has to be something else. Just through the chair to staff, is there a way we can sort of get around that problem?
Mr. Sith.
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. So there is a conflict between the town's intended use for Pheasant Glen when that zoning amendment was adopted and the province's legislation when it comes to short-term vacation rental. So the town's intention was to have a flexible tenure so that those could be rented short-term, or to have an option for permanent or long-term residential on some of those lots. So there's a conflict, and Mayor Westbrook and I actually met with the Minister of Tourism, which was one of the items that he was reporting on. So there is a potential to pursue an exemption for Pheasant Glen, a site-specific exemption, so that the town's vision for that site could be realized, and I think that would also be beneficial to the owner of Pheasant Glen. So that's something that we are looking into, and the owner could propose other strategies. But I think it's just really important to note that the issue is not that the town can't issue business licenses. The issue is that we cannot overrule the province's short-term vacation rental legislation. So even with a business license, the province could still say, well, you are permitted to live there year-round, and so therefore you can't list on Airbnb. So there's some conflicts, but we are working through. The issue is not with the town's bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I forgot about the provision. It has to be your primary residence. You're right. So yeah, that does make it kind of moot on our part. It's just a bit of a shame, though, because if they hadn't passed that, everything would be working out wonderfully. He told me how several folks who wanted to buy properties for long-term rentals and then use them exactly as tourist accommodation, and now they're backing out because of that overlap with the Rental Tenancy Act. Beyond that, of course, obviously we all attended AVICC. There was a lot of very informative things that we saw there. A really great presentation on health in our region, among others. But I think if you wanted to have a deep dive into all things AVICC, feel free to reach out to the councillors. We've got a long meeting and I don't want to take up more time discussing that. Thank you very much, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Skipsey.
Thank you. So my report is attached or part of the agenda. There is a recommendation here from the Heritage Forest Commission meeting, and there's some clarity requested around where the funds would come from for this split rail fence that is proposed. And I would like to move alternative staff recommendation, and the reason for that is that with bird nesting season starting January 1, going to the end of August, and then we get into the rainy season in the late fall, there's really just a small window that this can be done. So there are some funds expected to arrive in the Heritage Forest Reserve Fund, but the timing of that is unknown because it's part of probate and will process. So I would move alternate staff recommendation 1 for those reasons.
Seconded, Councillor Young. Discussion? Councillor Harrison.
I don't mind doing this because I understand when things are going through probate, it's it can be an arduous journey. But are we just sure that the amount is sufficient? Okay, I'm seeing a shaking head. Okay.
Thank you for that clarification. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. Councillor Vander.
Yes, thank you. My report also is included in the agenda, and I really don't have too much to add other than I enjoyed being at the VICC conference. Councillor Skipsey and I both attended a tour that was called Revitalization and Reconciliation, and it was a tour of different projects in Nanaimo for a variety of different projects. One was in the waterfront, one was in the park that they have there, and a couple of housing projects, and it was very informative and really showed the possibility for different projects around reconciliation, and I really appreciated that. And as mentioned, I also did attend the Chamber AGM, and that was a good event as well. And other than that, the list of my meetings are all there. Thank you.
When you look back over your calendar, you go, wow, did I attend all those? But it's a wonderful thing to do and support all these volunteer organizations and community groups that we liaise with. Thank you. Councillor Young.
Thank you. My report is also on page 63 and 64, but I have a few more things to add to my report. April the 8th, I also attended the Family Day Committee meeting, and so save the date. May 25th, the last Sunday of May, is always the annual Family Day, and go on the website for Family Day. They're still looking for more volunteers to help with the event on that day, and if you'd like to be a participant, whether you're a food truck or you want to be in the parade or be in an exhibit, please contact through the website. I also attended April the 8th, the Qualicum Beach Garden Club, and Jackie Mora was a speaker, and she talked about the power of the gardens for healing, which is really interesting when it's like, have a beautiful garden and you'd be amazed at how calming and healthy it is towards your attitude in life. Also attended the conference. It's always a joy to attend these government conferences because you get to collaborate with your fellow government peers. And a takeaway for me this weekend was the mental health issues, our medical infrastructure. We all either go to Nanaimo Hospital or the Comox Regional Hospital. But if we have anything really serious, and if Nanaimo Hospital is all booked up, you get ambulance or flown over to Royal Jubilee. So seriously, if you have major heart issues, it's a struggle to get your life saved. So we really need to get after our MLA. When Premier Eby mentioned about a tower and a lab thing that he was putting forward. It doesn't seem to be on the priority list after the election, so we need to continue to push our MLA to get more facilities built in our Nanaimo Regional Hospital. Also, we talked about, I went to a meeting on affordable housing, and there was a proposal about tiny homes that was workable for more affordability, and it's in conjunction with Island Trust. And yes, everywhere there is a need for affordable housing, and it's not the developers that are going to help us with that. It's how we can get the nonprofit organizations like our faith organizations like the church that you attend. If they have land, please ask them to help build affordable housing. April the 14th, I also attended the Flowerstone Society Strategic Planning, and they're working on fundraising for securing an executive director to aggressively pursue grants and recruitment of more nurse practitioners. Also, if you'd like to donate to Flowerstone Society, please do. Like all nonprofits out there right now, there is a lack of grants, and all these nonprofit organizations need the funding for administrative help and for an executive to pursue the grants. Also attended the Qualicum Beach Rotary, their monthly meeting, and they're now, again, asking people to get on their flag program for $50 a day. We can show our patriotism and our love for our country by Rotary member will put a flag on your front lawn on every special Canadian occasion. Like coming up is Victoria Day, and then there's Canada Day, and so on and so forth. And it's just $50 a day, and Rotary will take care of it. Oh, for the year, right. $50 a year, sorry. And also coming up, Qualicum Beach Earth Day. It started April 22nd in 1970, and this is an annual event, and it is all about us being mindful of our environment and taking care of the earth. And this year, the meeting is at the Rotary Hall on Beach and Fern. Please come at 9 o'clock to help out. I've heard that our town is pretty clean, so it shouldn't take too long. But if you know of an area that needs cleaning up, please come. You can get the garbage bag that's provided by the town. The town also provide a hand pick, and bring your gloves. And it's a fun little event. There's coffee and cookies provided by Rotary. Thank you.
That item actually comes back later on the agenda, as we discussed, but thank you for giving us the heads up and for your participation in that. Councillor Harrison.
Just one point Councillor Young raised. The issues about healthcare are being championed by a group called the Fair Care Alliance. They have a website, they have a petition you can sign. So I encourage you to look at the website, and if you're convinced that they have a good point, do sign the petition as well.
Thank you. So corporate services is next. Ms. Swenson.
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. So item 8.1 is a request from the Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere Region Research Institute requesting that they do an insect BioBlitz on town property at the community park and Grandin Creek. And so we're asking for a council resolution for that to happen.
Sorry, Councillor Skipsey, second, and Councillor Young. Discussion? Councillor Skipsey.
Yeah, I just wanted to move the motion, but change the acronym in the brackets to MABRRI, because MABR and MABRRI are two separate entities. So I just want to make sure we're clear.
Okay. We get a lot of acronyms. When I was at the ABICC, I think they could put a chart out how many there are. So thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. And please proceed, Ms. Swenson.
Thank you. Page 85 of your agenda, we have the staff report for policies. And as staff continue to advance Council's strategic initiative to carry out a comprehensive review of the town's policies, this report is to consider rescinding 13 policies that are no longer relevant due to factors such as changes in legislation, bylaw adoption, and local government best practices and legal precedent.
Thank you. Any questions about that? Councillor Harrison? You're moving?
I was going to be moving the staff recommendation.
Thank you. And seconded. Councillor Vander Valk. Discussion? Councillor Harrison.
Well, there's a quote, and I don't think the second part is applicable. There's a quote from Levy where he says, the more numerous the laws, the more corrupt the state. I don't think this is an issue of corruption. I just think this is an issue of duplication of effort, and I can imagine it being something that is well worth getting rid of the detritus, which no longer is actually legally enforceable. So kudos to staff for doing the work.
Thank you. Councillor Skipsey?
Thank you. There was just a couple of comments around E, I think, which is 3003-10, and it's parts of the policy. I don't think we need the whole policy, but I really believe that our volunteers need to know that they're appreciated. And I know of a couple of recent examples where someone has served on a committee for 10 years plus, and then just kind of fell off that committee. And to my knowledge, they never received a letter of appreciation from the mayor and council, which I think would be appropriate. So it may not need to be a policy, but I would like to see some of this good practice of the town stay and be incorporated somehow.
Yeah, I think that can easily be done with a reference that when a member of a volunteer group or committee retires, that we would know about it, because we would not send the invitation, but we would send a card of appreciation instead.
Yeah, I just think it would be nice to have something signed by mayor and council. If they've served for over a decade, I think in one case it was nearly 20 years on the Parks and Recreation Committee, and to my knowledge, they didn't attend the volunteer appreciation due, but it would be nice, I think, just to recognize that service.
So if you let us know, let Ms. Svensson know who that is, we can still correct that. Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
I was just thinking, too, that if there is any sort of formal documentation around Volunteer Appreciation Day, it's something we could easily incorporate as part of the ceremony, where long-serving members get special recognition as well.
Yeah, good idea. Thank you. So with that, any further discussion? Councillor Vander.
Yes, thank you. We did receive some correspondence regarding 3004-1, asking about, there used to be public input after meetings if the mayor essentially so deemed, and questioning whether that might be still included or brought back. And I'm not quite sure what the history of that was, so perhaps someone could clarify that for me.
Well, I think there was a pretty good comment from staff about that, where it's what we've done with the committee of the whole, where people can actually comment on an issue that we're debating in real time. So it's not that after the fact or after the meeting is over, people make comments, well, it's too late, we just made the decision. But the committee of the whole, we're inviting the public to speak to us while we're deliberating an issue. So I think that's better. And then we have the town hall / open house where people can speak on anything. There's no agenda. The agenda is that there is no agenda, so people can speak to us about that. So we experienced at times when we did have comments from the gallery after the meeting that someone would raise an issue, but we've already decided how we're going to deal with an issue that's was on the agenda. So it's better to speak before the meeting as a delegation. If they want to speak about something that's on the agenda, ask for a delegation like we had today. And that way we can still consider that when we make a decision rather than afterwards. We've also had, quite frankly, became a bit of a soapbox where people could speak and then sometimes accuse a member of council or several members of council of something, and then it becomes another meeting because now we have to debate that and we can't. Meeting is we're finished. So it was very complicated. And having the meeting online, people can submit their comments within a certain timeline, which would make it easier for us to deal with because it's in writing, it's well thought out, and we can respond to it if we so wish. But I think the current system, in my opinion, that's just my opinion, is working well. But if council wants to make a change, we can consider that. Councillor Harrison.
And just further to the mayor's point, we got a lot of soapboxing at one point. It was a handful of people, but there was also a few times they'd say things which are not factually true, and that would be the takeaway from people as they're leaving the meeting. And then staff, not knowing what someone's going to say, are in a position really to correct it in real time. And then we'd have to go to the next meeting and then correct something 3 weeks, 4 weeks later. And it sort of became something where, especially in the pandemic, people were a bit on edge. And it was just a couple of folks really pushing the line sometimes. So it's more to create a level playing field and make sure that we don't have to do these endless, well, actually, technically, what you heard last meeting at the very end isn't quite the truth, and then here we have to go back to it. And I do understand why in, like, say, 15 years ago, or when I first started attending council meetings about, like, 9 years ago, 10 years ago, it wasn't really an issue, but it did become an issue during that term.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. I didn't necessarily, wasn't suggesting that we change it, but I think for the reference for residents, it was a good explanation of why we have done what we've done. Thank you.
So those 13 recommendations has been moved and seconded. Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. Then we have the subsidized rental plus 2 additional ones. Ms. Svensson, could you read out the 2 additional requests?
Yes, thank you. So the one that's on the agenda is for the School District 69 KSS Fine Arts, and then we have 2 additional ones. KSS Mid-Island Youth Climate Action synopsis, which will be held on April 25th, which is a youth climate initiative put on by the school. And the subsidy we're requesting is $312. And then the second one is Oceanside Bridge Club, and they're holding a bridge tournament from May 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, and the subsidy is $468.
I think we can take them all in one, unless council has an issue. Councillor Skipsey? All those are approved. Second, Councillor Young. Discussion. Councillor Skipsey.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a plug and encourage people in the community to come out and support our youth. The premier performance is a really enjoyable evening highlighting the artistic talents of the students in the fine arts with artwork on display. There'll be the musical, the bands playing, and sometimes I think we are going to be treated to a performance from some drama students as well. So, and tickets are available at the door.
Thank you. So any further comments, discussion, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you, Ms. Svensson. And we have Finance, Mr. Hare.
Oh, sorry, there's still two more
sorry,
items.
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
So a special events request from the Qualicum Beach Farmers Market to host a summer solstice night on June 26 on Veterans Way. The resolution is on page 6 of the agenda.
Okay. Anyone like to move that? Councillor Vander Valk? Councillor Harrison, discussion, all in favor, opposed if any, carried. Thank you.
And one last one, which was the late item, and that was the request to authorize the Rotary Club for Earth Day on Friday, April 25th.
Okay. Would like to make that motion, Councillor Young? That's kind of your bailiwick. Councillor Young, Councillor Vander Valk, discussion, all in favor, opposed if any, carried. Thank you. Finance, Mr. Hare.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the report in front of you is for your consideration, includes a request for capital expenditure from the Curling Club that was made subsequent to the approval of the financial plan. The request is to replace the dehumidifier, which is part of the ice plant, at a capital cost of $40,000. There is correspondence attached to the report from the Curling Club that describes the need for the expenditure and the timing. This would be funded from the Curling Club Reserve, and the Curling Club makes an annual contribution to that reserve, which is matched by the town. There are sufficient funds in the reserve to fund this expenditure, and if approved by council, this expenditure would be added to the amendment, fall amendment of the financial plan.
Thank you. Any comments, questions? Motion to approve. Councillor Harrison, Councillor Vander Valk. And I noticed there was a great interest from the previous delegation from the lawn bowling how this works. So all in favor? Opposed of any? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hare. Planning, Mr. Sales.
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. The first item under planning today is the Ways to Achieve Attainable Market Housing Initiative, which was first brought up in the strategic planning process and has since been refined through discussions with the Official Community Plan Review Steering Committee and as well as staff work. So I'm going to provide a brief overview of the process that we're proposing and how it relates to the Official Community Plan Review. So as council and the public are aware, we're currently reviewing the Official Community Plan, and the focus of that review for this year is housing because of the provincial requirement that we complete it this year. As a complement to that whole process, council had indicated last year that we would like to see something that is actionable, that we want to see real solutions on the ground, looking at creative solutions that maybe haven't been seen in Qualicum Beach before. So we designed this two-part process so that the OCP review would be followed by this Ways to Achieve Attainable Market Housing Initiative to kind of ground truth the high-level policies in the OCP and then come up with an actionable plan. So that's too bad. I had a step-by-step, but it is in your agenda. I don't know what the presentation apparently didn't get updated. So I would refer you to the page in the agenda that actually has the request for proposals, and I'll just highlight which page that is. My apologies. Okay, so we're on page 110 of the agenda. So the process that's being described here is once again has been refined by the OCP review with the clear intention to come out of this process with a list of things that are actually actionable. So first of all, it's important to note that the OCP review, one of the things that the town will be receiving at the end of that is some clarity around which groups in the town that the town's going to be focusing on for the purpose of this plan. So understanding that housing needs are very broad and that there's many groups that do require housing, but where does the town start and how should those priorities be identified? So that's going to come out of the OCP review. So this process starts with handing that information to the consultant. So there will be a list of the priority housing groups coming out of the OCP review. The consultant, meanwhile, would be preparing what we're referring to as a housing opportunities report that kind of describes the context in Qualicum Beach. So understanding a bit of the background, constraints and opportunities in terms of assessing and developing attainable solutions. So the consultant then, in collaboration with the OCP Review Steering Committee, would develop criteria to evaluate potential solutions. And this is a very carefully defined process to ensure that later on we can open the doors to all sorts of creative ideas, but we've already developed the criteria for evaluation. So together with the OCP Review Steering Committee, those criteria are developed. And then the consultant can cast a wide net and engage the community and say, what types of ideas do you have for creative housing solutions we haven't considered before? That could be anything from cooperatives in terms of other types of financial models, tenure arrangements, rental, lease to own, ownership, or it could be physically different solutions like tiny homes or RV style living. So a very wide net in terms of the types of solutions that the consultant would be inviting from the public. And then the next step would be that each of those proposed solutions from the community or interest groups would be evaluated using those criteria that we identified earlier. So it establishes a relatively neutral and unbiased process to ensure that we can consider any proposal that comes in and kind of assess it against those community values that we established earlier. So then the solutions that rate the highest are considered to be the most feasible, and each of those would be developed in more detail by the consultant. So at the end of the day, we would end up with a small set, so only 5 to 8 of the most feasible solutions. So rather than identifying 100 possible ways the town could go, we only need a handful. We need to know what the most viable paths forward are. And so the intention is that that would come out of this process. And the timeline is that it would start on the tail of the OCP consultation. So after the summer, this project would be starting public consultation, and then the report would be developed. The intention is to conclude it in the first quarter of 2026. So if there are any questions, well, actually, I'll just briefly summarize. So the authorization being requested by council today is to issue this request for proposals, so we could take it out to see which types of consultants or consultant teams might be willing to undertake this for the town. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sales. Any questions to Mr. Sales about this, or make a motion accordingly? Councillor Vander, seconded. Councillor Skipsey, discussion. Councillor Harrison.
Well, I do disagree with this because for me, we always come back to the fact that residential construction in our area is about $400 a square foot. So unless you're doing a tiny home or a mobile home, both of which depreciate in value, you're not able to do affordable market housing, even with free land. But at the same time, the RFP is solid, so it's a good RFP.
Thank you. Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you, Mr. Sales. It says bike rig, but I'm pretty sure it's a bike rack, although I have heard about a bike rig before. It's very handy when you do a lot of landscaping. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. There has been a request from the Legion to install a bike rack at the corner of Veterans Way and Berwick Road. There's a tiny blue dot on the screen up there that shows the intended location of the rack. and the Legion has done some fundraising to help share the cost of it. So this is authorization for the town to proceed with installation of a rack there with cost to be shared. The installation would be done by town staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll move that as I'm the liaison to the Legion. Is there a seconder? Councillor Young, discussion. All in favor? Opposed, if any, carried. Thank you. And then the zoning amendment on Chester Road, Mr. Sales.
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. Next item on the agenda is consideration of a zoning amendment for a property at 324 Chester Road. I would note that there's also a development permit application that is submitted for this, although for the purpose of today's meeting, the development permit is not under consideration for issuance, so just for background. So this property is at the end of Chester Road, and it's a fairly large residential parcel. I'm highlighting on the screen where Chester Road is because basically the road dead ends here. So for those that aren't familiar with the exact location, Beach Creek comes around like this and continues on. So what makes this application somewhat unique in the context of zoning amendments is that the request is not to increase the residential density on the site. The request is to allow all 4 of the residential dwelling units that are permitted in the zoning to be strata titled individually. So just for background, last year when the town implemented the requirements of the province's Bill 44 initiative, there were 2 approaches with different regulations with regard to strata title. So in the village neighborhood, so the area that's essentially a walkable distance from the uptown core, those areas didn't have any limitations on the number of strata titles you could register on the parcel. So you could have 4 dwelling units, all 4 of which could be strata titled individually. Outside of the village neighborhood, there's a different zone, and in those zones, there's a maximum of 2 strata titles that can be implemented. So a property owner could still build the 4 units, but they could only strata title 2. So if they're developing the property, they can only sell 2 individually. The other 2 units would be suites of some sort, either little cottages, attached, detached, in various configurations, but only 2 of them could be sold. So the property owner has applied for a zoning amendment to obtain town permission to strata title all 4 of these units that are proposed. So that's the context on the zoning amendment. The development permit is required for a different reason, and that is that when we implemented Bill 44 last year, we implemented residential design guidelines for all of these types of infill developments, and those design guidelines apply throughout the town, so that if someone applies to build one of these, duplex, triplex, fourplex types of developments, they would be reviewed to ensure that it meets our guidelines around form and character, whether it's heights, setbacks, relation to other properties, landscaping, all those types of aspects that are addressed in the design guidelines. So the recommendation from staff is to refer this application to the Advisory Planning Commission. The Advisory Planning Commission will likely have some comments and insights with regard to the compatibility with the design guidelines, and also perhaps on the topic of tenure. And so that's one of the 2 recommendations before you today. The second recommendation, which is number 1 up here, I think warrants a little bit more explanation because it's a new process for us. Because Bill 44 and the changes to the zoning just happened last year, we haven't had a lot of these applications come forward where this process has happened. So it's come up in previous meetings, the question of who and how is the decision made as to whether an application is compliant with the official community plan. So that decision is up to council unless that authority is delegated, which it has not been. So the first recommendation here is confirmation from council that this application, which is the zoning, whether or not the residential units can be strata titled, whether that is compliant with the official community plan. And it is staff's recommendation that is compliant with the official community plan. However, the process as laid out by the province does require the town, which council is the decision maker, to confirm that. So that the process moving forward if council does decide to advance the zoning amendment, is a bit different than in the past, where an application would come to council, council would perhaps consider first reading, and then later on they would have a public hearing. So if council considers an application to be compliant with the official community plan, then there cannot be a public hearing later on, but the process changes. So let's just explore the scenario of how it would unfold in future meetings. So if council said, yes, this is compliant with the OCP, it would go to the OCP, or go to the Advisory Planning Commission, come back to council. Council could then give it 1 reading, 2 readings, 3 readings, even 4 readings in a single meeting, because there's no longer a need for a public hearing. And in conjunction with those readings in the future, the town could consider issuance of the development permit. So it's a bit unusual that the province's new process requires an extra step at the beginning to say, yes, it's compliant with the OCP, because then we need to advertise and say, we're considering this without a public hearing. So that part's a little bit unusual that they added a step inadvertently, but here we are. The step has been added, so that's what the requirement for the first motion here. So with that, if there are any questions, I'd be pleased to take them. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, so just one, I think we should probably do these separately. So I'll just move number 1, that we view it's compliant with the OCP.
Councillor Young seconding. Discussion. Councillor Skipsey?
Yeah, well, I just wondered if staff might kind of refresh our memory about what the criteria for being compliant with the OCP would be. Are we talking about density? Are we talking about height, setbacks? Yeah, I would just like to maybe clarify that.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Skipsey. So compliance with the OCP, from the perspective of staff, basically comes down to land use. So whether the intended use of the property and the general descriptions around usage and such comply with it. In this case, it's very, very clearly in alignment from the perspective of staff, because this is exactly what the OCP allows. The only distinction is the tenure, whether or not it can be sold or not. So when we look at what the OCP currently says for the property, which is residential, that's exactly what's being proposed. So it's just a change in the details, I think you could say.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, my point on this idea of council determining whether or not something is OCP compliant, that to me just screams potential litigation. I really would feel way more comfortable this is something that was done at the staff and maybe a legal level, not so much at the council level, just because, I do worry about that. But that's something where we're going to have a conversation moving forward, not today. But I do think at the end of the day, it's a little bit risky if council determines that something is OCP compliant, and it turns out we're wrong. Or it gets argued in court and the judge disagrees. I'd really want to avoid that.
Thank you. Councillor Young, and then back to Councillor Skipsey.
I'd like to make an amendment to this motion then to leave out compliant with official community plan, and to have it so that this application is providing more density for our town, and the owner, I believe, needs to sell 3 of the units so that he can afford to do this development. And so I'm in favor of it being 4 stratas instead of 2.
Seals?
Through the chair, I'm not entirely clear on what the amendment to the motion is, so if you could provide more clarity, that would be helpful. Thank you.
It would be best if in writing, and then give it to the Ms. Svensson.
Okay, I was just following up with Councillor Harrison and saying that when we say compliant to the OCP, we could come up with some legal issues. So rather than having compliant with the OCP, it would be whether or not we would allow this development to have 4 strata units instead of just 2.
Thank you. Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Your Worship. So for clarity, the first piece really is about whether a public hearing will be held or not. So if council deems this to be compliant with the OCP, a public hearing cannot be permitted to be held. And if you deem it to be out of compliance with the OCP, then a public hearing would be held. So I think that's the clarity, and if the director wants to add anything to that.
Mr. Seals.
Yes, thank you. So further to CIO Varela's comment, if council considered this to be non-compliant with the official community plan, an OCP amendment would also be required at the same time, because you can't advance a zoning amendment without compliance with the OCP.
But you in your comments and in writing state that it is compliant with the OCP. I think what the question is, can they all be single-owned, or do they have to be rented by two owners having two rental units, one each? How does that work?
Thank you. The official community plan doesn't speak to the tenure, in terms of how many units can be sold or not. So that's just not addressed in the OCP. What is addressed is the general land use for the property, which is residential. So that's why staff suggests that this is in compliance with the OCP.
So all 4 units could be sold and owned individually?
So just clarity, once again, the OCP doesn't speak to that, right? So it's not covered at all in the official community plan. Where it is covered is in the zoning bylaw. So that the official community plan just says it's residential, right? The same as all the other areas in the town, or most of the residential areas. The distinction is that the zoning bylaw last year, when the town had adopted that update, distinguished between areas in the village neighborhood and outside of the village neighborhood in the tenure. So in answer to your question, this property for the intended use of the 4 units would be compliant with the OCP regardless of whether it's 2 strata units or 4 strata units.
But we don't have to specifically state that only 2 can be sold and 2 must be rented?
That's correct. So the OCP wouldn't say that you had to limit the number of strata title units, correct?
Thank you. Councillor Skipsey, Councillor Young.
Thank
Councillor Vander, sorry.
I just wanted to get some clarification on page 123 under the first number 1. Recent policy changes from the province of BC, specifically Bill 44, has required a minimum of 4 dwelling units per parcel. My understanding is that it's up to 4. It isn't a requirement to have a minimum of 4. Can we just get clarity over that, please?
Mr. Seals.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Skipsey. So the province's legislation required that the town permit 4 dwelling units on every parcel that was over a certain size that was serviced by municipal services. So this property is on municipal services and meets that minimum threshold, which is extremely low. So it was required by the province to permit 4 dwelling units.
Yeah, so it probably would read more clearly if has required a minimum of 4 dwelling units be permitted per parcel or something, so that, because otherwise it sounds like 4 units have to be built in my reading of it.
Thank you. Through the chair. I believe that the page you're referring to was provided by the applicant, so that's just in the application material. It's not in the staff report.
No. Sorry, it is page 123, and it's number 1, and there's a staff comment. And it says, recent policy changes from the province of BC, specifically Bill 44, has required a minimum of 4 dwelling units per parcel. But I think that a minimum of 4 dwelling units must be permitted per parcel.
Oh, thank you. Now I see. So that's right. The requirement was for the town to permit it, not that it actually be used for that. So thank you for the clarity. Yes.
Thank you. I think probably because we're just looking at the first part of the recommendation, that we're kind of skipping into the second. So my understanding is that we're deciding on the first part, whether it is in fact compliant with the OCP or not. My question would be if it's, essentially what the proponent is asking, and again, I'm kind of going back and forth between the two recommendations, but essentially what they're asking for would be allowing R1 to be changed to R2, which then could apply to any place in the town if we wanted to do that. So I guess my basic question is, within the OCP, if it's R1 as opposed to R2, is there flexibility within in the OCP then for that above and beyond changes to the zoning? Do you understand my question? Kind of.
I think it would be useful to know. So the intention is just to do a site-specific zoning amendment for this property. So this would be, if this were advanced, the only property that would be changed from R1 to R2 would be this one. So it's site-specific. So the OCP does allow for that. And I know that there is a little bit of confusion, or maybe not confusion, but because the discussion is a little bit mixed, we're talking about three different issues. One is whether this is compliant with the OCP. Then there's a bit of discussion starting about whether or not we should be advancing the zoning amendment. That's actually not being considered today, because that would be considered in a future meeting, after the Advisory Planning Commission. And then the third discussion is whether or not this proposal meets the form and character guidelines that were adopted last year. So that one would also benefit from the APC insight and then a detailed report of the design guidelines. So I just highlight that because I think it would be maybe beneficial for the discussion to make sure we're addressing those issues separately. And the first one is just whether or not it's compliant with the OCP. Thank you.
So based on what you have said previously, then according to the use, the land use, that would, to your mind, make it OCP compliant, because essentially that's all we're looking at? Is that correct?
That is correct. So that's the recommendation for number one.
Thank you. Councillor Skipsey, and then Councillor Young.
I just wanted to clarify what I think I heard you say was that if we are going to, okay, so I'm okay with number one, but if we are going to send it to the Advisory Planning Commission, which is number two, by doing that, we're not necessarily saying that we are approving the rezoning from R1 to R2.
Mr. Sales?
Through the chair, and thank you for that clarity, Councillor Skipsey, because that is absolutely correct. The council is not making a decision as to whether to advance the zoning amendment through the bylaw reading process today. The only two decisions are whether you would say it's compliant with the OCP and whether you want to refer it to the Advisory Planning Commission. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Young.
Thank you. I'd like to have clarity on that. We are going to allow this owner to have, to build 4 strata units, because the only reason why he's looking to help us out with density is because it would be an affordable project. So there is no point for him to go further to the advisory committee until we allow him to say that he can sell off 3 units and keep 1 unit for himself, because it won't be an affordable project otherwise. So there's no further need for this owner to go to any more development if this isn't allowed a 4-unit strata.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Young. So what you described there, essentially council authorizing the owner to do the 4 dwelling units, that decision is not necessarily proposed for today, but that requires 4 bylaw readings. So in other words, it's not actually a decision that council could make today. there's no scenario where council can amend the zoning all 4 readings today to give the applicant permission. Thank you.
Councillor,
But I understood that this to be for this site only, like, so it's not like a overall changing of these zonings, but just this is site-specific?
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Young. Yeah, that's correct. So even a site-specific zoning amendment does require an amendment to the bylaw, which requires 4 readings.
so on the first one, and that was moved and seconded, we've had good discussion. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. And number 2. Councillor Harrison, are you moving?
So just before we move anything, there's a book I've been reading, started reading a couple days ago called Abundance by Ezra Klein and I think it's Peter Drummond? I forget the Atlantic author. He writes for the Atlantic. But one of the things they talk about is how process becomes its own thing as opposed to outcomes. What is the outcome for this project for units that are relatively more affordable? I look at alternative 1 when we're just doing first reading. Staff have a question here about parking. I think before we get to second or third, maybe you go to the APC, but just for first reading to entertain it, fine. If they can provide the information on parking without having to go through the APC, great. When I look at pages 132 and 133, which, no, sorry, it's 131 and 132, sorry, my apologies. That's the renderings, basically, of the building from the front. The back looks a little bit interesting. I'm not sure about that, but when we're talking about neighborhood compatibility, most people aren't visiting the back of your neighbor's property, where it's just trees, as far as I can see. So, I don't know. I see that the front looks very compatible from what I can see on those 2 renderings. And hopefully the proponent can provide clarity on parking, which is the staff comment about parking, which I understand that there's some concern. I'm just not quite sure what the concern is. So maybe before we do anything, Mr. Sales could just provide clarity on what that parking issue is.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Harrison. Staff are not saying that it's a problem. The parking is not a problem. There's parking noted on the plan, but it doesn't actually say exactly where it is. And so it's just clarity. And just to clarify, the purpose of going to the Advisory Planning Commission is twofold. One, to get comment on compliance with the design guidelines. So that's fulfilling the DP requirement. And then the second would be commentary on, the request to do the 4 strata units versus the 2. So there's 2 things there. The trip to the Advisory Planning Commission, they would need to review the information. In order to review in compliance with the design guidelines, they need a bit more information than what is included in the package today. So that's often the request, is that it goes to council first, because if council says this is not of interest to council at all, then there's no point wasting the applicant's time or the Advisory Planning Commission's time on something that's not of interest. So it comes here first. If council is interested, then they prepare the other additional information, goes to the APC, and then comes back to council. So I hope that provides some clarity on the process.
Well, just for clarity too, there's no obligation to go to the APC on any individual project. So it doesn't have to go to the APC. And it does cost, because you do have to get this professionals essentially to present on this. So I just think that just doing first reading alone, not second, not third, and give them some time to provide clarity on that. If it's just really what we're looking for is clarity on parking, we think it looks nice. I think it looks fine. And then if they can provide clarity of the parking at second reading, great. If not, then we can refer it to the APC at that time.
Councillor Skipsey.
I guess I just had one question. Would it be appropriate for the Advisory Planning Commission to comment on the proposed pickleball courts? I mean, when we're looking at neighborhood compatibility, is that something that is included? Or just I'm wondering if neighborhood compatibility also relates to where it is located on the site versus the neighbors, because I think it's quite close to the property line.
Okay, can we discuss on the second item, sending it to the Advisory Planning Commission?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if it would be appropriate for the Advisory Planning Commission to comment on some of the amenities, I guess, that are being proposed, like the pickleball court, and the location of the buildings versus the neighbors.
I don't know if there's any proposal for a pickleball court in the neighborhood there.
It is.
The site plan has a pickleball court on
Right,
it.
but I think the question is, do we want to send this to the APC?
Right, and I'm asking if the thing is, if the APC's purview to consider things like pickleball courts or the location of the building on the site related to the neighborhood. There's a comment here, comment on parking and neighborhood compatibility. So do those two things fall under neighborhood compatibility?
We'll find out when I get it. So, but at first we need a motion if we want to send it to the APC. Councillor Van Valk?
Yeah. Well, to be quite honest, I don't agree with this zoning amendment. I think that it is zoned R1 and that there could be there are alternatives available. They can build 4 units, but I don't know that we necessarily want to change everybody's, all the R1 zoning into R2 zoning, and that was my earlier comment. If we change this, it is site-specific, yes, but that means that anybody and everybody could apply, make the same application. And there's a reason, I believe, why there's only titles for 2, and that's because we're trying to get rental accommodation built. So I don't really agree with the zoning amendment, and I think if the rest of council thinks that we should look at it, then we need to at least send it to the APC for review. And I also do have some other things that I would like to see included in that APC review. So I think those should be added if it is going to the APC.
Perhaps you could lay out what you have in mind that the APC should look at.
Okay. I did have questions, as Councillor Skipsey did, about the inclusion of a pickleball court, a picnic area, and a play area. I'm not quite sure what the plan is for that. Why are those things being included? And they still are very close to the edge of the ravine. So why would you put those in if you're concerned about the building having to be at the back? Why would you have things at the front? And the noise concerns, especially in the heritage forest. There's a very big roof and adds to the height. So I would question that part of the design, or included in the questions regarding the design guidelines. And also the APC has in the past requested that some context be given in terms of the neighboring properties. And I think it would be good to have the neighboring house that's to the east of this property, have it shown in both the height and the layout of the property. I think that needs to be looked at. And then also the fact of energy efficiency is mentioned somewhere in the report. And sorry, I don't know exactly where, but has that been looked at? Is there any special consideration of energy efficiency and heat pumps if they're at the back? What about the noise? And also they mention a viewpoint, and they have a picture of a viewpoint on page 149, which is my understanding that is town property, but they have the use of it. So I'm wondering what would happen with that. I guess that's about all my questions, but I think we really need to look closely at it, and I think we also need to understand that in terms of the changing the zoning and changing the number of titles, that really changes what's going to be built where in the community. And right now, RT is in the neighborhood village community, or neighborhood village, and that is where we have said we would like to see most of new density happen. And this goes counter to that. So that's my opinion.
All right, so first I would like to ask, that list that you presented could be, if it goes to the APC, could be submitted as well, so they can see the questions you like response to. Councillor Young.
I'd like to comment that I appreciate that this is a site-specific ask, and that I'm looking at the backyard amenities is merely for the tenants. I'm not expecting the owner to open it up to the public. So I don't think that there would be a major noise issue or a congregation of many more people in that area. It is end of the block is a corner unit. So I just don't think that it's going to be bothersome to surrounding neighbors. But I also like to say that, yes, there is a need for rental housing, but there is also a need for affordable housing. And there's not one prioritized over the other. They're both dire needs. And this being site-specific, I really appreciate that there is more affordable housing built. And I've heard from the owner that he's only doing it because he does need to have 4 strata units so that he can sell off 3 to be able to afford this build. Otherwise, to do a 2 strata unit, he just will not be able to afford this build. So we'll end up with no development. And that's my comment.
Thank you. I'm not too concerned about the pickleball either. We've had neighbors that had young children and they played basketball. And bouncing the basketball can be equally annoying if you're so inclined, but I'm not concerned about that. But I would like to see it go to the APC with all the questions and comments that Councillor Vander provided. So I need a motion for number 2. Number 2, Councillor Vander seconding number 2. Discussion. So Mr. Sales, can you provide that list that you had to our staff, so when it goes to the APC, that those questions could be considered? Further discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Harrison, Councillor Young, opposed. Thank you.
Your Worship, just one thing.
Yeah.
I'd actually move first reading.
Well, that didn't get seconded, so it didn't go anywhere.
That's all right. We have to wait a second to see if it would get seconded.
No.
Mr. Sales has his hand up.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. I mentioned earlier the requirement that the town has to advertise that there will be no public hearing if something's in compliance with the OCP. And it's a catch-22, Councillor Harrison, but I need to clarify. If you give first reading, if Council gives first reading today, then you must have a public hearing, and you've, by default, deemed it to be non-compliant with the OCP, which makes no sense. My apologies, but that's the legal advice that the town has. It was the inadvertent result of the province's legislation. So unless the decision to deem things OCP compliant is delegated to staff, Council needs to decide whether it's compliant with the OCP. The town needs to advertise and then proceed with the bylaw process.
Fair enough. Could you just provide that legal in a future in camera?
Go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair, to Councillor Harrison. It was a verbal opinion. It could be developed into a written opinion. We can continue this in camera for sure.
Yeah, just in camera, because every single time we want to move first reading, we have to have a public hearing, wherein the legislation says we're not supposed to, and I think a lot of folks will get confused. So even if it doesn't apply to this project, eventually we're going to have something we're going to move on first reading, and we want to make sure that everything is clear on that.
And as far as a motion that's not seconded, and Ali Mina spoke on Sunday morning about that, and we asked to double confirm that, because I asked it at a question period, if there is no appetite to proceed with a motion that's being suggested, don't second it, it just dies. He said suffering is optional. So if there's no appetite to support a motion, you don't have to second it for discussion, so to speak. But the explanation that Mr. Sales gave, I think, would determine that it's probably better not to go ahead with that anyway.
Fair enough, but then, yeah, we're just moving on then.
All right. So on the second, for number 2, we had, it's been voted and it's been passed with Councillor Young and Councillor Harrison opposing. Thank you. Development variance permit, Fern Road East. Mr. Sales.
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. This next item will be relatively brief. So the town has received development variance permit applications for the property at 119 Fern Road East. This is the third application, and it's changed a few times. The last time council approved it, there was actually an error in their calculations in terms of the variance, so they didn't request the proper variance. So it's come back to council, and the request now is not for the sign area, but they miscalculated the letter size, and when they actually put it on the building, they said, that's not what we thought we were going to get. It was a very small sign. So this, as you're seeing on the screen up here, is the current version. It, from the perspective of staff, is entirely compatible with the intention of the sign bylaw, but it does need to go through the variance process to correct the amount that was previously approved by council. Thank you.
Move the staff recommendation.
Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Skipsey. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? If any, carried. Discussion. Oh, you have a discussion. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to clarify, in our package on page, I guess it would be 169, because it's not numbered, there is a picture of the sign in the dark, but it looks like this is a non-illuminated sign. Is that correct?
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Vander, the sign bylaw permits illuminated signs, but only the letters may be illuminated. So in this case, what's shown on the screen is how it would be displayed. So it is an illuminated sign, but only the lettering is illuminated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. It's been moved and seconded for the discussion. All in favor? Opposed? If any, carried. Thank you. Seacrest. Who's going to speak to that? Mr. Watson? Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Worship. Yes, this first report is a request from staff to have council proceed with authorizing the contract for the Seacrest Place slope stabilization project to David Stocker Excavating. You may recall back in January, we received early budget approval for this project. Once we had the design completed, we put it out on BC bid for a request for qualifications. 4 of the 6 contractors that submitted those proposals were shortlisted and given an opportunity to bid on the project, and it closed subsequently on March 26. The total value, or the total figure that we have in our budget for this year in our financial plan is $2.586 million. David Stocker Excavating's quote came in at about $1.9 million. And between all of the soft costs, the costs that we've spent to date, and we're expecting that the project is going to come in at $2.337 million. So that's going to leave about $250,000 that we'll be able to put back into the funding source for this project for future capital projects. So the recommendation is that council does proceed with authorizing this work, and the total price of $1,899,940 to David Stocker Excavating. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison?
Moving the staff recommendation.
Move staff recommendation. Councillor Skipsey seconding it. And we also discussed this with Chief Ricalma. We discussed a number of projects. This was one of them, and he didn't have any concerns with this particular job. Councillor Vander.
Just had a question. I think when this came before us before, we had been denied money from the province, and we were going to take a second kick at the can. Do we know anything more about that? No. Okay. Thank you.
Covers a bear, I'm told. But we are pursuing under a different ministry. Councillor Harrison.
And just to point out too, for the public's benefit, 200,000 of the 2.337 is a contingency, just because it's such a steep slope. So ideally, we don't have to spend that much. They do spend only the 1.9, but it's a good idea to have that contingency in there. But kudos to staff for getting something under budget.
Thank you. As we moved and seconded, Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Watson. And it was really good. I commend you for having a detailed plan of all the projects that we're doing that we invited Chief Recalma to put input into, and he did, and made some suggestions, and I thought that was very helpful. Electrical engineering, who's going to, oh, Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I will hand off to the Manager of Capital Projects if Council chooses, but I thought an introduction would be useful. This is resulting from previous Council decision-making where you had identified 25 properties that you wanted a third-party electrical illumination engineer to examine. Of the 25 properties, 5 were eligible for recommendation. There was actually something achievable you could do. 3 of those involved a light relocation. So the recommendation before you is to act on 2 of the 5 recommendations, not including those that consider relocation of lights, because we anticipate that could result in additional complaints from new property owners. Council is this was the last stage. Council has previously provided direction not to take further action on streetlights after this. So the recommendation before you is to submit to BC Hydro's SLIM system for recommendations on lights adjacent to 2 properties. So we would submit that through the SLIM system and not take action on the other 3 as per the engineering report. And lastly, to take no further action on those properties identified. So there is a map, the same as last time. Council gets to consider each of those properties, and the recommendation is before you.
Thank you, Ms. Varela. Any questions to Ms. Varela? Councillor Skipsey? Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. I think it's a really good report, and it does show, actually, interestingly, the amount of light trespass that happens and the strange configurations that it goes in almost to a point on some properties. I would like to make maybe one small amendment to number 2, which is being an optimist, and further that the town be prepared to incur costs for BC Hydro's modification in the hopes that maybe they would be willing to fix some of the problem themselves. So I don't know if we could add be prepared to incur.
Under number 2?
Under number 2, so
Okay.
that we'll pay it if we have to, but if they want to help us out there, that would be greatly appreciated.
Okay, so Ms. Svensson, do you have the amendment?
Yes, thank you. Just inserting be prepared after the word town
Yeah,
on number 2.
okay. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Van Valk seconding. Discussion on the amendment. Councillor Harrison.
I'm pretty sure I can bet on the fact BC Hydro will choose to let us pay for it.
Thank you. Councillor Young, okay. So on the amendment, Councillor Van der Valk.
No, not on the amendment.
Okay, on the amendment, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, thank you, Carrie. So now the recommendations as amended. Further discussion, Councillor Van der Valk.
Thank you. I do have a question, and I was kind of hoping that the consultant would be here to explain some things, but I just have a question about their analysis, and if we look at page 186, which covers 186. So they're looking at different situations at 490 Crescent Road West. And it just struck me, if we look at the 4 differences, so one is the initial 100-watt HPS luminaire, and then the bottom or below that is, as that got older, what the light fall is. And then on the next page, 187, what happens when we replaced it, or it was replaced with 75-watt LED luminaire. And then what happens with the 39-watt LED. And then it looks at different possibilities for doing davit arm angle and luminaire tilt and mounting height. But my question is, looking at the 75-watt LED and the 39-watt LED, the shape of how the light falls has changed. And so my question would be, in the analysis, how was that light fall assimilated? Like, what was the difference in the input of their criteria that caused that? So I would like to know what the answer to that is. But further to that, I would like to see BC Hydro receive this report and look at it, and maybe they could comment on why, because what we're measuring is the lux, the front yard, the lot, the lighting levels, sorry. And we're not looking at how the lighting falls on the property, and that seems to be the problem. So I'm wondering if we could send the report to BC Hydro, and maybe they could make some suggestions as to what else we could look at, because they are limiting what we can do. And I'm just trying to get them to look at the situation perhaps from a different point of view and offer suggestions to us as to how we could improve it.
Thank you. Mr. Watson, this is one of your projects, I think. Any thoughts, any comments on what was asked?
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, I can tell you that they took measurements out in the field, and then they brought that back and they entered it into a computer modeling program, and that's how they came up with these, looks like a contour map essentially. So that's how these lines showed up on their computer program. It was all based on the height of the light on the pole itself and the nature of the fixture. And I can also tell you that I did try to reach out to the SLIM program people specifically to try and get some answers how this works. We go through the SLIM program often for, a light bulb is out and we need to have the BC Hydro come and fix it, for instance. But redesigning something is a bit of a different process. And about 2 months ago, I reached out to ask, what is the process and how do I get a cost estimate for the purpose of this memo? And they didn't answer, so I followed up 2 weeks later and I said, how long would this take to get an answer for? And the answer was essentially, we're not sure. So I don't know how long it would take to get an answer for those, if we were to give them this report. I don't have an answer to that.
Thank you. Any follow-up questions?
Yes, thank you. So when you mentioned that their criteria included the nature of the fixture. So from my limited experience with the lighting situation, that seems to be why it has such a different shape, like it's much more oblong and kind of goes into lots more. So essentially what I would like to have happen is for BC Hydro to look at this and see if that is the reason why it's trespassing onto properties more, and maybe suggest an alternative is ultimately what I would like to see happen. But I think if we could at least send them a copy of the report, then maybe it would become more clear to them, or maybe they'd be totally disinterested and say, never mind. But I think we could send them a copy of the report.
Yes, we can give that direction to staff to do that. Councillor Skipsey.
Well, I would support sending BC Hydro a copy of the report so they can see the amount of light trespass that happens on private property, and maybe just get comments from them whether they feel that's acceptable or if they have some kind of standard. I think it does a good job of illustrating the impact on individual property owners. And with that, I would like to divide up the recommendations and perhaps defer number 3 to a future meeting of council once a response from BC Hydro has been received.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion, Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, so I have a hunch that a province-wide program isn't going to be changed by a report on a couple dozen lights in a community of 9,500 people. I could be wrong on that, but I think we really have to focus on when we interact with BC Hydro, what do we want that interaction to be long-term? We need to electrify our airport to transfer over to electric planes. It's going to require 3-phase power. It's going to require a lot of input with BC Hydro. Electrification more broadly, we have to reach out to BC Hydro on a lot of things. I don't think we want to waste bandwidth and time with their senior staff on revisiting the light issue where we've already had a face-to-face with them. They went over the program with us. If we really want to fix the trespass in those 2 properties, we should then buy the pole, and then we can put whatever we want on that pole, including shielding that would prevent it from doing that trespass. BC Hydro has been explicit for years that they're not going to put on shielding, so we know they're not going to fix that problem. So we either buy it, and then we can handle it ourselves, or we move on. Those are really the only 2 outcomes that are going to happen. So if council wants to spend more money on this and start buying individual lights to address individual trespasses, that's an option, but it's a fair chunk of money.
Right, so at this point, Ms. Councillor Skipsey would like to deal with the first 2 as amended and then the third one separately. Okay, so could I have a motion on the first 2? So Councillor Skipsey and Councillor Harrison, number 1 and 2, as amended. Further discussion on those 2. All in favor? Opposed, if any? And now, Councillor Skipsey, you'd like to change number 3.
Yes, but I don't know if Councillor Vander Valk would like to make a motion to send the report to council, whether that would be appropriate to go first.
BC Hydro.
Or BC Hydro, sorry. Yes.
Councillor Vander Valk.
Sure. Well, I would move that BC Hydro be sent a copy of the E2 electrical engineering Qualicum Beach street lighting obtrusive lighting analysis for the town of Qualicum Beach to analyze the increased light trespass. So I'm looking specifically at how it falls onto the property and offer suggestions to decrease this light trespass. And that would be my motion.
And that's seconded by Councillor Skipsey. So the motion would be to not deal with number 3 at this point, but to send BC Hydro the report that you referred to. That's the motion. Discussion. Any comment from staff? Mr. Watson.
I just want to point out one thing that I just clued into. The old high-pressure sodium fixtures had a bulb that came out and down, and that's probably why you see it shedding a little farther than what the LED fixture does, because the LED fixture has a flat glass base on it.
What about sending the report to the BC Hydro? Have we exhausted our interest with them about how to fix some of these issues? Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Your Worship. So staff going to retain this report for you from the third-party illumination expert really was a result of council's discussions with BC Hydro. They said that they couldn't address the issue any further. Go get this report done. We now have the third-party report before you that have identified 5 possible adjustments out of the 25. So the third party is saying no further action can be taken to adjust lights for the others in a way that we could make an application through SLIM. So if you refer to page 215 of your agenda, those recommendations are laid out there. Again, we could provide the report to BC Hydro, but they were pretty clear that this was a responsibility of council to retain the expert, get the report, make any decisions you had, and then to submit those through the SLIM system. Again, they're going to look at multiple factors, even in the recommendation for 2 of the lights, where the recommendation is to consider adjusting the davit arm. They still make those decisions in light of whatever else is going on the pole, which is often encumbered in numerous ways.
Thank you. So on the, this is a separate motion. And Ms. Swenson, can you read out the motion that Councillor Skipsey presented?
Moved by Councillor Vander, seconded by Councillor Skipsey, that staff be instructed, or that BC Hydro be sent a copy of the report titled, I don't have the title, but analyze, where are we here? Sorry, I just didn't catch the title of the report, but I'll start again. The BC Hydro be sent a copy of the report to analyze the increased light trespass and offer suggestions to decrease light trespass, and that item be deferred until a response is received from BC Hydro.
Right, and just for clarification, it seems like BC Hydro already has commented that they say this is all we can do. So I'm not sure if we want to keep pushing this. I'm quite prepared. I was quite prepared to go with number 3 as presented in our plan, because we've gone back and forth and we had an engineer look at it separately, and these were the recommendations. So I think we can go again, but I feel I think we've done a good job in addressing, as far as I can see, the majority of the complaints, and the ones that we can't. Our engineer, separate from BC Hydro, suggested that only 2 could be addressed, and we've going ahead with that. So I would not be in favor at this point to send another report and get the answer that we already got from BC Hydro saying, this is now yours. Councillor Harrison.
Just 1.2 is that I know the bottom of 187, we see the current distribution, and you have that very long vertical, essentially, trespass. But if you go to the top of 186 for the exact same properties, and you look at the original sodium distribution, and you actually look at the house where those lines line up, it's basically the same as far as how far back it goes. It's more of a weird, like large oval shape. But if I was working for BC Hydro, I would be saying there's like a tiny sliver more it goes back on 490 and 484, close to the property line. But if you look at how much of their homes used to be covered when those old lights were first installed, there's actually more of their house that used to be covered by the light. So I really don't think that sending this report back is going to do anything in this case. I think they're just going to look at it and say, yeah, that's what it is. And to Councillor Vander and Councillor Skipsey's point, if they do provide us with the information that they're going to entertain shielding in the future or do some other change, we can always revisit this decision at a future point. So if BC Hydro changes the way they do things, we can respond to that change. I just don't think we'll get a change from sending this report to them.
Yeah, and I don't know either. Councillor Vander first, Councillor Skipsey.
Yeah, I think that the shape actually does affect the homeowners more in what is currently there. But I also think that BC Hydro needs to see the results of our report. They've asked us to do a report, but I would like them to see the results of the report and to understand what it is exactly that we're trying to improve. And I don't think, my opinion is there's no harm in asking. If they want to say, no, forget about it, well, then that's their option. But I would like to at least send them the report and they can make a decision from there. I don't think it's a lot of staff time or expense to have this report sent to them. And I don't see any disadvantage to sending it to them. I don't want to presuppose their decisions.
Thank you. Councillor Skipsey.
Well, I agree with that. And maybe we don't have to ask them for solutions, but I think we could ask them for a comment on it that, about the light trespass, and just leave it at that. I did the 490 Crescent Road West. I actually did do a site visit to that location, and there is a big difference, and the reason why is because there's a little shed at the back behind the home, and what happens is under the current configuration, the light goes far enough to hit the shed and bounce back into their bedroom. So, yeah, so to say it's almost the same, it is almost the same, but it is different. So I just thought I would add that.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor to send this report to BC Hydro. Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Your Worship. So staff would be supportive then of sending both the staff report and the report, the attached engineer report, to BC Hydro. If there can be a discussion to be had about those additional properties, staff can have that. But again, based on previous discussions with BC Hydro, we know that this was the path they directed us down. But we can report back to council after providing that.
Sure. So that's been moved and seconded for the discussion. All in favor? Councillor Skipsey, Councillor Vander, Valk, Mayor Westbrook, opposed. Councillor Harrison, Councillor Young, opposed. Carries. Okay, the next item is the implementation of the fees at electric vehicle charges. Who's going to deal with that? Mr. Watson? Okay.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yep. So this is for council consideration to implement fees on the public EV charging stations that we have. Up until just a couple of months ago, we had 7 dual stations in our inventory, and a couple of months ago, we added a new station to the train station. So now we have a total of 8, and last year we spent $5,271 on EV charging cloud service that are required to operate those EV chargers. So having the cloud service allows us to review the charging times that people are using. It allows us to implement fees if we so desire. And it allows us to have an app on our phones, and we can monitor the serviceability of each station. We can turn it on and off from our phones, for instance. In 2022, in response to some vandalism, we purchased 5 refurbished stations. We had quite a rash of vandalism, unfortunately. So we purchased 5 at a very discounted rate of $1,100 each. We still have 2 of those in stock for future vandalism, but a replacement cost of those chargers are about $10,000 at this time. And should they reach the end of their life in another 10 years from now, they'll be likely in the $15,000 neighborhood. So we need to consider those costs for the future. Based on some data that I collected off of the ChargePoint dashboard, I extracted a 6-month period of number of kilowatts used and the amount of time that people were plugging in their vehicles. So I used that data to figure out how much it's actually costing us. And it turns out over the course of the year, it's about $9,000 bill for the cost of electricity alone. So between the electricity and the cost of the subscription, the annual fee, it's a $14,000 bill every year that we have those in service. So with this data, I approached Mid-Vancouver Island Electric Vehicle Association and asked for their input. And they said there's 2 fee structures that are most common. The first one is to implement a fee structure that is based on price per kilowatt. And the other, a more favorable type of fee structure, is to implement it by the time. And that encourages people to plug in, get their charge, and move along to free up the space for other people. So the fee structure that they suggested was to implement a 2.5 cents per minute for the first 2 hours, and then 7 cents a minute for every minute thereafter. And that would be in line with what the city of Nanaimo has recently implemented as well. Based on those figures and using the times that were used over the course of the year, we would have collected about $48,000 in revenue, minus a 10% fee for the ChargePoint processing fee. And based on the average 2-hour and 16-minute session that drivers are plugging in for, that would cost them about $4.12. So it's not a huge amount. So based on the information provided, the recommendation is that council approve the implementation of fees for EV chargers, and that we further amend our miscellaneous bylaws, or rate bylaw, to include a fee structure of 2.5 cents a minute for the first 2 hours and 7 cents a minute for every minute thereafter. Thank you.
Not so much about the fee, but when I heard about the vandalism, is there a possibility we can have security cams in that area?
Mr. Watson?
Not all areas, I don't think. Well, actually, shouldn't say that. I'd have to look into that. I'd have to look into that.
It is a concern. Would you like to move the recommendation?
Yes, I'd like to make a recommendation that we...
No, the recommendation that's on from the staff about the vehicle charging station?
Yes, I'm good on that, so...
Okay. And seconded by Councillor Vander. Discussion. Councillor Skipsey.
I just had a quick question. I am in support of this. I think the time has come that we need to start charging for this. But I think that the Town Hall North is probably pretty much exclusively used by the town vehicles, and I'm wondering if that would be included, if there's a reason to do that.
Yeah, thank you for your question. So are you referring to the ones where the volts and the, so that one is not on an EV charger that we can charge fees for. That's our own system there, yeah. No, it's only for the other public chargers on the south side.
Signage indicates that that's what it's for. Councillor Harrison.
I think the general direction of having basically two rates makes a lot of sense, but hearing about people who just park overnight, I'd actually suggest we might want to look at basically making the 2 hour. If the average charge is about 3 hours, then fine, average charge 3 hours, that's the lower cost, which would be the same cost of 0.025. But then after 3 hours, we do charge more than the 0.07 cents. And so it starts to add up. So if you're going to charge more than the average charge, you're going to start paying a lot of money. And hopefully that would get rid of people essentially trying to get free parking at the airport in particular. Because I did read the staff report that that's something that's becoming a thing. But the general direction is fine, but I just remember Bob Weir saying how the town's peak water usage was the late 1980s. And the reason for that is that all the extra water didn't cost anything. So I like the general direction, and maybe we'll get an update in a year on this policy. But I'd actually change the hours a little bit, tweak it a little bit. But I think as it is fine. I don't want us to endlessly belabor this with countless council meetings. But I just suggest as we move forward, then maybe monitor it in a year, we get a report, and then maybe look at those times and then how we punish bad behavior.
Thank you. That's a reasonable action. And thank you, Mr. Watson, for doing all the research and contacting other communities, because we parked at the parking in Nanaimo, and did you have to put in anything? Okay. So, yeah, we parked in the parking area in Nanaimo, and it was free. You're saying that Nanaimo has changed and they're charging? Okay. Pardon? Well, we may be receiving a ticket after all.
Just for context, there was I think it was a VIEA. I was 10 minutes over, and I got a ticket. So yeah. I think you just got lucky.
All right, so it's been moved and seconded. Further discussion. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you, Mr. Watson. That was a very good report. FireSmart. Who's going to deal with that? Mr. Stanger? There you go.
Thank you, Your Worship. The FireSmart initiative is part of the Town of Qualicum Beach Park Service Review of 2025. And what we're hoping to do this year is start at the Dolomount Trail between Berwick and Hemsworth. And for that work to commence, it's going to take up to 3 weeks. And what we would like to do for it to be, the two reasons we don't like closing trails or pathways, but for this work to commence and for it to be safe for the public and also for productivity, we've looked at it and we believe that closing the trail for up to 3 weeks while this work is completed is the safest and most productive option. So for that, we're recommending that we can close the trail starting on April the 28th for 3 weeks, up to 3 weeks, sorry, and that the times there would be from 7 AM to 3:30 to work with our staff's operational hours, and it would only be from Monday to Friday. It would be open at nights and the weekends.
Thank you. Now, along that area, there's a bark mulch trail, so to speak, and a paved path. So are they both going to be closed?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, we are. We're going to close because we're going to be working on both. Our equipment is town-owned equipment that we'll be using that will be on the path trail, but we're also going to be working on the gravel trail as well to widen both of those areas to work within our community plan.
Thank you. So how would people who expect to go there, is there a way around, like a detour that you're proposing?
Yes, Your Worship. What we're planning to do is have signage at both sides and at each access you can get, and the detour would be down onto Village Way, where there is a large shoulder of approximately between 2.5 and 3 metres that they will be able to access to go along from Hemsworth to Berwick.
Thank you. Councillor Skipsey.
Yeah. I just note that this is the time of year that the PE teachers at KSS get their students outside and using the pathway, so it just might be nice. I know you said that you would be doing some public advertising, but it might be nice to contact the school directly and just advise them of this closure.
And the alternative route? Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Just moving the staff recommendation first.
Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Skipsey. Discussion? Councillor Harrison.
Just one question through the chair to staff, if I may. I'm just curious as to, is there sort of like a overarching document which shows these are our priorities based on what we see, or is this sort of just done where there is a sort of a need that's pretty clear and obvious, and so you're tackling things sort of as we go? Because I know that there's endless documentation in local government. I'm just wondering if there's sort of like a master plan for FireSmart, or are we just sort of taking things in terms of what staff deem to be the most important areas to address?
Through the chair, Councillor Harrison. Yes, we have looked at, we've worked alongside the fire department, and we've looked at the busy areas and the most risky areas, and this area between Berwick and Hemsworth, we think that doing this work here, you'll be able to see the initiative of the FireSmart and the work that we'll be able to do. So that was the reason that we picked this area to be the first one. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councillor Vander.
I just had a quick question. Because there is the two paths, is there a possibility of closing one, keeping the other one open, and vice versa? Or are you advising against that?
Thank you, through the chair, Councillor Vander. We looked at both options, if this could do, but they're closer than you think. What we're actually doing, we're actually going 3 metres wide by 2 metres high. So when you look at the asphalt trail to the gravel trail, they'll be very close. So the work that the staff will be working on will be in both sides. So we'll be taking up both trails at the same time. So to be mostly further initiative and to go forward, this is the best plan, is to close the trail, and it'll be the most productive and it'll be the shortest period of time.
Thank you.
That's why there will be signage and directing people along the shoulder of Village Way. Thank you, Mr. Stenger. Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. I think that concludes the agenda. So with that, a motion to adjourn. Councillor Skipsey, Councillor Vander.